Chapter 10 of The String of Pearls. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Red Abras. The String of Pearls. Author unknown. Chapter 10. The Colonel and his Friend. Colonel Jeffrey was not at all satisfied with the state of affairs as regarded the disappearance of Mr. Thornhill, for whom he entertained a very sincere regard, both on account of the private estimation in which he held him, and on account of actual services rendered by Thornhill to him. Not to detain Joanna Oakley in the Temple Gardens, he had stopped his narrative, completely at the point when what concerned her had ceased, and had said nothing of much danger which the ship Neptune and its crew and passengers has gone through after Mr. Thornhill had been taken on board with his dog. The fact is, the storm which he had mentioned was only the first of a series of gales of wind that buffeted the ship for some weeks, doing it much damage, and enforcing almost the necessity of puffing in somewhere for repairs. But a glance at the map will be sufficient to show that, situated as the Neptune was, the nearest port at which they could at all expect assistance was the British colony, at the Cape of Good Hope. But such was the contrary nature of the winds and waves, that just upon the evening of a tempestuous day they found themselves bearing down close inshore on the eastern coast of Madagascar. There was much apprehension that the vessel would strike on a rocky shore, but the water was deep, and the vessel rode well. There was a squall, and they let go both anchors to secure the vessel, as they were so close inshore, lest they should be driven in and stranded. It was fortunate they had so secured themselves, for the gale, while it lasted, blew half a hurricane, and the ship lost some of her masts, and some other trifling damage, which, however, entailed upon them the necessity of remaining there a few days to cut timber, to repair their masts, and to obtain a few supplies. There is but little to interest a general reader in the description of a gale. Order after order was given until the masts and spars went one by one, and then the orders for clearing the wreck were given. There was much work to be done, and but little pleasure in doing it, for it was wet and miserable while it lasted, and there was the danger of being driven upon a lee shore and knocked to pieces upon the rocks. This danger was averted, and they anchored safe at a very short distance from the shore in comparative safety and security. "We are safe now," remarked the captain, as he gave his second in command charge of the deck and approached Mr. Thornhill and Colonel Jeffrey. "I am happy it is so," replied Jeffrey. "Well, captain," said Mr. Thornhill, "I am glad we have done with being knocked about. We are anchored, and the water here appears smooth enough." "It is so, and I dare say it will remain so. It is a beautiful basin of deep water, deep and good anchorage, but you see it is not large enough to make a fine harbour." "True, but it is rocky." "It is, and that may make it sometimes dangerous, though I don't know that it would be so in some gales. The sea may beat in at the opening, which is deep enough for anything to enter. Even Noah's ark would enter there easily enough." "What will you do now?" "Stay here for a day or so, and send boats ashore to cut some pine trees, to refit the ship with masts." "You have no staves, then?" "Not enough for such a purpose, and we never do go out stored with such things." "You obtain them wherever you may go to." "Yes, any part of the world will furnish them in some shape or other." "When you send ashore, will you permit me to accompany the boat's crew?" said Jeffrey. "Certainly, but the natives of this country are violent and intractable, and should you get into any row with them, there is every probability of your being captured, or some bodily injury done to you." "But I will take care to avoid that." "Very well, Colonel, you shall be welcome to go." "I must beg the same permission." said Mr. Thornhill, for I should much like to see the country, as well as to have some acquaintance with the natives themselves. By no means trust yourself alone with them, said the captain, for if you live, you will have cause to repent it, depend upon what I say. I will, said Thornhill. I will go nowhere but where the boat's company goes. You will be safe then. But do you apprehend any hostile attack from the natives? Enquired Colonel Jeffrey. No, I do not expect it, but such things have happened before today, and I have seen them when least expected, though I have been on this coast before, and yet I have never met with any ill treatment. But there have been many who have touched on this coast, who have had a brush with the natives and come off second best, the natives generally retiring when the ship's company musters strong in number, and calling out the chiefs, who come down in great force that we may not conquer them. The next morning the boats were ordered out to go ashore with crews prepared for the cutting of timber, and obtaining such staves as the ship was in want of. With these boats Mr. Thornhill and Colonel Jeffrey went both of them on board, and after a short ride they reached the shore of Madagascar. It was a beautiful country, and one in which vegetables appeared abundant and luxuriant, and the party in search of timber for shipbuilding purposes soon came to some lordly monarchs of the forest, which would have made vessels of themselves. But this was not what was wanted, but where the trees grew thicker and taller, they began to cut some small pine trees down. This was the wood they most desired; in fact, it was exactly what they wanted. But they hardly got through a few such trees when the natives came down upon them, apparently to reconnoitre. At first they were quiet and tractable enough, but anxious to see and inspect everything, being very inquisitive and curious. However, that was easily borne, but at length they became more numerous, and began to pilfer all they could lay their hands upon, which of course brought resentment, and after some time a blow or two was exchanged. Colonel Jeffrey was forward and endeavouring to prevent some violence being offered to one of the woodcutters. In fact, he was interposing himself between the two contending parties, and tried to restore order and peace. But several armed natives rushed suddenly upon him, secured him, and were hurrying him away to death before any one could stir in his behalf. His doom appeared certain, for, had they succeeded, they would have cruelly and brutally murdered him. However, just at that moment, aid was at hand, and Mr. Thornhill, seeing how matters stood, seized a musket from one of the sailors, and rushed after the natives, who had Colonel Jeffrey. There were three of them; two others had gone on to apprise, it was presumed, the chiefs. When Mr. Thornhill arrived, they had thrown a blanket over the head of Jeffrey, but Mr. Thornhill in an instant hurled one with a blow from the butt end of his musket, and the second met the same fate, as he turned to see what was the matter. The third, seeing the colonel free, and the musket levelled at his own head, immediately ran after the other two, to avoid any serious consequences to himself. "Thornhill, you have saved my life!" said Colonel Jeffrey excitedly. "Come away, don't stop here. To the ship, to the ship!" And as he spoke, they hurried after the crew, and they succeeded in reaching the boats and the ship in safety, congratulating themselves not a little upon so lucky an escape from a people quite warlike enough to do mischief, but not civilized enough to distinguish when to do it. When men are far away from home and in foreign lands, with the skies of other climes above them, their hearts become more closely knit together in those ties of brotherhood which certainly ought to actuate the whole universe, but which as certainly do not do so, except in very narrow circumstances. One of these instances, however, would probably be found in the conduct of Colonel Jeffrey and Mr. Thornhill, even under any circumstances, for they were most emphatically what might be termed kindred spirits. But when we come to unite to the fact the remarkable manner in which they had been thrown together, and the mutual services that they had had it in their power to render to each other, we should not be surprised at the almost romantic friendship that arose between them. It was then that Thornhill made the colonel's breast the repository of all his thoughts and all his wishes, and a freedom of intercourse and a community of